Welcome to Fireside Mysteries. Tonight, we venture into the shadowed corridors of London's most exclusive financial institutions, where fortunes rise and fall on whispered words, and where betrayal wears the mask of respectability. Hercule Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective, finds himself drawn into a world of silk top hats and leather ledgers, where the columns of figures tell stories far darker than mere profit and loss. Join us for the banker's betrayal, a tale of greed, deception, and the terrible price of misplaced trust, crafted in homage to the masterful Agatha Christie, whose genius we honor, though this mystery unfolds on our own terms. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you joining us from tonight? Your presence illuminates our journey through these shadowed mysteries. Now, let the story unfold. Chapter 1. The Summons to Threadneedle Street. It was a grey February morning when the letter arrived at our rooms in Whitehaven Mansions, bearing the embossed seal of Ashworth and Hartley Private Bank. I, Captain Hastings, was engaged in the pleasant task of reading the morning papers, while Poirot attended to his correspondence with his customary precision. Each envelope opened with a silver letter knife, each page aligned perfectly before reading. "Hastings," Poirot murmured, his voice carrying that particular note I had come to recognize. The subtle quickening of interest that preceded our most intriguing cases. "We have received a summons." "A summons?" I set down the Times. "From whom?" "From Sir Reginald Ashworth himself, the senior partner of one of London's most venerable private banking houses." Poirot's egg-shaped head tilted as he studied the letter, his magnificent moustache twitching slightly. "He writes with some urgency, mon ami. He fears, he says, that someone within his own institution means to destroy him." I confess I felt a stirring of excitement. The world of high finance had always seemed to me a realm of impenetrable tedium, columns of figures and endless documents. But Poirot's eyes held that gleam I knew so well, the gleam of a puzzle presenting itself to his remarkable little grey cells. "Destroy him how?" I asked. "That he does not specify. He requests our presence at the bank's offices this very morning, at 11 o'clock precisely." Poirot consulted his pocket watch. "We have 2 hours. Time enough for a proper breakfast and appropriate preparation." The headquarters of Ashworth and Hartley occupied a handsome Georgian building on a quiet street not far from the Bank of England. Its facade spoke of centuries of accumulated respectability. Portland stone darkened by London's perpetual soot, brass fittings polished to a military shine, and heavy oak doors that seemed designed to repel all but the most worthy of clients. A uniformed doorman admitted us to a marble-floored entrance hall, where a young clerk with pomaded hair and an anxious expression awaited. "Monsieur Poirot, Sir Reginald is expecting you. If you'll follow me, please." We were led up a sweeping staircase, past portraits of stern-faced gentlemen in the attire of previous centuries. The founders and former partners, I surmised, their painted eyes seeming to follow our progress with disapproval. The clerk knocked upon a mahogany door at the end of a carpeted corridor. "Enter." Sir Reginald Ashworth's private office was a monument to Victorian prosperity. Leather-bound volumes lined the walls, a fire crackled in an ornate marble fireplace, and behind a vast mahogany desk sat the man himself, a figure of imposing presence despite his 60-odd years. His silver hair was swept back from a high forehead, his eyes were sharp and assessing beneath heavy brows, and his bearing suggested a man accustomed to command. Yet, as he rose to greet us, I noticed the tremor in his hands, quickly suppressed. The shadows beneath his eyes spoke of sleepless nights. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings." He gestured to a pair of leather chairs before his desk. "Thank you for coming so promptly. I find myself in a position I never anticipated, that of a man who cannot trust those closest to him." Poirot settled into his chair with characteristic precision, arranging himself just so. "Your letter spoke of destruction, Sir Reginald. Perhaps you would be so good as to elaborate." Sir Reginald moved to the window, gazing out at the grey London street below. When he spoke, his voice was measured, but I detected an undercurrent of strain. Ashworth and Hartley has stood for 147 years. We have weathered wars, financial panics, the rise and fall of empires. Our reputation is our greatest asset, a reputation for absolute discretion, unwavering integrity, and sound judgment. He turned to face us. Someone is attempting to destroy that reputation, and in doing so, they will destroy me. How so? Poirot inquired. Irregularities have appeared in our accounts. Small at first, discrepancies that might be attributed to clerical error. But they have grown. Funds have been misplaced. Investments have gone astray. And 3 weeks ago, one of our most valued clients, Lord Pemberton, withdrew his entire fortune from our care, citing concerns about the bank's management. He was specific about these concerns? No, but rumours have begun to circulate. Whispers in the clubs that Ashworth and Hartley is no longer to be trusted. Sir Reginald's hands clenched at his sides. Someone is feeding these rumours, Monsieur Poirot. Someone with intimate knowledge of our operations. Someone who means to see this institution and myself brought to ruin. Poirot's fingers formed a steeple beneath his chin. You suspect someone within the bank itself. I suspect everyone and no one. It is a terrible thing, Monsieur Poirot, to look upon faces you have known for years and wonder which conceals a traitor. Tell me of these faces, Poirot said. Who comprises the inner circle of Ashworth and Hartley? Sir Reginald returned to his desk, lowering himself heavily into his chair. There are 4 partners, including myself. My son, Geoffrey, joined the firm 5 years ago after completing his studies at Cambridge. He handles our younger clients, the new industrialists who prefer a modern approach. And your relationship with your son? A shadow crossed Sir Reginald's face. Geoffrey is ambitious, perhaps more ambitious than is entirely comfortable. He has new ideas, new methods. We have had our disagreements. Continue, please. Then there is Philip Hartley, the grandson of the bank's co-founder. He manages our foreign investments. A solid man, reliable, though perhaps lacking in imagination. His family's stake in the firm is substantial. And the third partner? Charles Blackwood. Sir Reginald's tone cooled perceptibly. He joined us 15 years ago, through merit rather than family connection. A brilliant financial mind, I will grant him that. But 6 months ago, I discovered he had been indiscreet. Indiscreet in what manner? Gambling. Charles had accumulated substantial debts. Debts he concealed from the partnership. When I confronted him, he begged for time to make amends. Against my better judgment, I granted it. Sir Reginald shook his head. I begin to wonder if my mercy was misplaced. Poirot nodded slowly. And beyond the partners? There is my personal secretary, Miss Helena Crane. She has served me faithfully for 8 years. I would trust her with my life. He paused. Or I would have said so before all this began. Anyone else with access to sensitive information? James Whitmore, our chief clerk. He has been with the firm for 30 years. Knew my father before me. And there is Marcus Webb, our legal counsel, though he operates from separate offices. A most comprehensive household, Poirot observed. Now, Sir Reginald, I must ask you a question of some delicacy. These irregularities in the accounts, is it possible they represent more than sabotage? Is it possible that funds have been embezzled? The word hung in the air between us. Sir Reginald's face flushed. I have considered it, he admitted. The amounts are not trivial. Over the past 18 months, discrepancies totaling nearly £30,000 have appeared. The money has simply vanished. £30,000! I confess I was staggered by the sum. It represented a fortune, enough to purchase a substantial estate, to live in comfort for a lifetime. And you have made no report to the authorities? How could I? The scandal would destroy us more certainly than the theft itself. Our clients trust us with their most intimate financial affairs. If word spread that Ashworth and Hartley had been robbed from within, Sir Reginald spread his hands helplessly. I would be finished. The bank would be finished. 147 years of honour, erased in an instant. Poirot was silent for a long moment. I knew that silence, knew the little grey cells were ordering and arranging, categorizing and calculating. Sir Reginald, he said at last, I will undertake this investigation, but you must understand, the truth, once uncovered, cannot be buried again. If there is a traitor within your walls, I will find them, and if that traitor proves to be someone dear to you, I understand. Sir Reginald's voice was firm. I would rather know the truth, however painful, than live in this purgatory of suspicion. Très bien. Then I shall require access to your accounts, your correspondence, and your staff. I will wish to interview each member of your inner circle. And I must ask that you say nothing of my involvement. Let it be understood that I am here as a prospective client, nothing more, whatever you require. One final question. Poirot rose from his chair, pausing at the door. You spoke of destruction, of ruin, but you haven't mentioned the possibility that goes beyond mere financial harm. Have you considered, Sir Reginald, that your life itself might be in danger? The banker's face paled. I had not allowed myself to think, then permit me to think it for you. A man who would steal £30,000, who would destroy a venerable institution and all who depend upon it, such a man has already crossed lines that most would find impassable. What is one more line when so much hangs in the balance? Poirot's dark eyes held Sir Reginald's gaze. I advise you, monsieur, to be very careful indeed. Trust no one. And if anything occurs, anything at all that strikes you as unusual, you will contact me immediately. As we descended the sweeping staircase, I found myself troubled by Poirot's warning. The portraits of past partners seemed even more disapproving now, their painted eyes following our retreat. What do you make of it, Poirot? I asked as we emerged onto the street. I make of it, mon ami, a most interesting puzzle. Poirot paused to adjust his coat against the February chill. A bank under siege from within. A circle of suspects, each with access and opportunity. And at the centre, a man who fears betrayal, but cannot bring himself to name his betrayer. You think he suspects someone in particular? I think he suspects everyone. And yet, Poirot shook his head. There was something in his manner, Hastings. When he spoke of certain individuals, his voice changed, the emphasis shifted. The little grey cells, they take note of such things. Which individuals? But Poirot merely smiled. That infuriating smile he wore when the pieces were beginning to align in his extraordinary mind. Patience, mon ami. First, we must observe. We must listen. We must allow the players in this drama to reveal themselves. He hailed a passing cab. Tomorrow, we shall return to Ashworth and Hartley as prospective clients. We shall meet these partners, this secretary, this clerk. We shall ask innocent questions and observe guilty reactions. And if the traitor strikes before we can unmask them. Poirot's face grew grave. Then I fear, Hastings, that Sir Reginald's concerns about his safety may prove tragically justified. We must work quickly. The walls of that ancient institution conceal secrets, and secrets, when threatened with exposure, have a terrible habit of turning deadly. The cab rattled through the grey London streets, and I found myself wondering which of those respectable faces we would soon encounter concealed the heart of a traitor. Geoffrey, the ambitious son, Blackwood, the gambler with hidden debts, the loyal secretary, the solid partner, the trusted clerk. One of them, I was certain, held the key to this mystery. But as I would soon learn, the truth was far more devastating than any of us could have imagined. Chapter 2. The Partners of Ashworth and Hartley. The following morning found us once again upon the doorstep of Ashworth and Hartley, though our reception on this occasion was rather different. Sir Reginald had arranged for us to be received as prospective clients of considerable means, a fiction that required Poirot to adopt an air of wealthy continental reserve, a role he performed with evident relish. Monsieur Henri Vauquelin, he announced to the young clerk who greeted us, presenting a card of elegant ivory stock. I am considering the transfer of certain substantial interests to an English institution. Sir Reginald Ashworth has been recommended to me by mutual acquaintances. The clerk's demeanour shifted perceptibly at the mention of substantial interests. Of course, Monsieur Vauquelin. If you would be so good as to wait in the partners' reception room, I shall inform Sir Reginald of your arrival. We were ushered into a handsome chamber adjoining the main banking hall. A room designed, I suspected, to impress upon prospective clients the solidity and permanence of the institution. Oil paintings of pastoral English scenes adorned the walls, and the furniture was of that heavy, reassuring sort that suggested generations of careful stewardship. We had been seated but a few moments when the door opened to admit a young man of perhaps 30 years, fair-haired and sharp-featured, with the restless energy of one who finds inactivity intolerable. Monsieur Vauquelin, I am Geoffrey Ashworth. He extended his hand with practised warmth. My father mentioned you were considering our services. I trust your journey was comfortable. Most comfortable, thank you. Poirot accepted the handshake, his eyes making that swift, comprehensive assessment I had witnessed so many times before. Your father speaks highly of the firm's capabilities in managing international assets. Geoffrey settled into a chair opposite us, crossing his legs with casual elegance. We pride ourselves on our adaptability, Monsieur Vauquelin. The world is changing rapidly, new industries, new opportunities. A bank that cannot change with the times is a bank destined for irrelevance. He smiled, but there was an edge to it. My father and I do not always see eye to eye on such matters, but I believe the future belongs to those willing to embrace innovation. You disagree with your father's approach? I respect my father's experience, but experience can become rigidity if one is not careful. The old ways served well enough in the last century, but we are in a new age now. Geoffrey leaned forward, his enthusiasm evident. I have proposed several new investment strategies, opportunities in American markets, in emerging technologies. Father is cautious. Caution is not always a fault. Poirot observed mildly. "No, but excessive caution can be its own form of recklessness. While we deliberate, others act. Opportunities are lost." Geoffrey's jaw tightened momentarily before he recovered his polished manner. "Forgive me. I did not mean to burden you with internal disagreements. You are here to discuss your own affairs. Indeed, though I confess such candour is refreshing. It speaks well of a firm that its members may voice differing opinions. We are not a monolith, Monsieur Vauquelin. We are a partnership, and partnerships, like marriages, require negotiation." Geoffrey rose. "If you will excuse me, I believe my father is ready to receive you now. We shall speak again, I hope." When he had gone, I turned to Poirot. Ambitious, as Sir Reginald said, and clearly frustrated by his father's leadership. "We," Poirot murmured, "frustrated enough to sabotage the very institution he stands to inherit." "It is a question worth considering." Sir Reginald received us in his private office with the formal courtesy appropriate to our supposed status as wealthy prospects. The meeting that followed was largely theatrical, a discussion of investment philosophies and portfolio structures that meant little to me, but which Poirot navigated with surprising fluency. At length, Sir Reginald suggested we tour the facilities and meet the other partners. "Philip Hartley manages our foreign investment division," Sir Reginald explained as he led us down a corridor lined with offices. "His family has been intertwined with ours since the bank's founding. A most dependable man." The office we entered was notably more austere than Sir Reginald's, functional rather than impressive, the walls lined with maps and financial charts rather than portraits. Philip Hartley himself matched his surroundings. A solid, square-faced man of middle years, with the manner of one who distrusted ostentation. Monsieur Vauquelin. Hartley's handshake was firm, his gaze direct. "Sir Reginald mentioned you might have interests in continental markets." "I have interests in many things, Monsieur Hartley. Diversification, I am told, is the key to preservation of capital." "Quite so." Hartley gestured to a chair. "Though I would caution that diversification without understanding is merely another form of gambling. One must know what one is buying." "You disapprove of gambling, monsieur?" Something flickered in Hartley's eyes. "I disapprove of unnecessary risk. The distinction between investment and speculation is often narrower than people suppose. My role here is to ensure that our clients' foreign holdings are sound, stable, and protected against the vagaries of international politics. A conservative approach. A prudent one. I have seen fortunes evaporate when men chased promises of quick returns." Hartley's gaze shifted briefly to Sir Reginald, then away. "We have had discussions on this topic within the partnership." The tour continued, though I noted that Poirot's attention seemed particularly acute whenever the relationships between partners were mentioned. We passed through the main banking hall, where clerks in dark suits bent over ledgers, their pens scratching in near silence. At a desk near the window sat an older man, his hair grey and thinning, his spectacles perched upon a sharp nose. "James Whitmore, our chief clerk," Sir Reginald said quietly. 30 years with the firm. Knows more about our operations than anyone alive." Whitmore looked up at our approach, his eyes shrewd behind the spectacles. "Sir Reginald, shall I prepare the quarterly summaries you requested?" "Not just yet, Whitmore. I'm showing these gentlemen around. They may be joining us as clients." "Very good, sir." Whitmore's gaze swept over us with professional assessment before returning to his ledger. I noticed his hands gnarled with age but steady, the fingers ink-stained from decades of meticulous work. As we moved on, Poirot paused before a closed door at the end of the corridor. "And this office?" Sir Reginald's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Charles Blackwood. He is occupied with a client at present." "Ah." Poirot nodded, as though this were of no consequence. "Perhaps another time." We returned to the partners' reception room, where Sir Reginald excused himself briefly to attend to a matter requiring his signature. The moment he had gone, Poirot was on his feet, moving with that cat-like precision that always surprised me in a man of his build. "Hastings, observe the room. What do you see?" I looked about, uncertain what he sought. "Comfortable furniture, paintings, a rather fine Persian carpet. Oui, but look more closely. At the desk in the corner, what rests upon it?" I crossed to examine the small writing desk, positioned near the window. Upon it sat a leather blotter, a silver inkwell, and a small stack of correspondence. Beside these, almost hidden by a vase of flowers, lay a slim leather notebook. "The notebook! Pick it up, if you please, carefully." I did so. The leather was worn at the edges, suggesting frequent handling. Inside, the pages were covered in neat feminine handwriting, columns of figures and abbreviated notes. "It belongs to Miss Crane," Poirot said, appearing at my shoulder. "The secretary. See, her initials are embossed upon the cover. H.C. What of it? A secretary might naturally leave her notebook in a reception room. Might she? A notebook containing, one presumes, confidential notations regarding the firm's business." Poirot's eyes gleamed. Either Miss Crane is careless, which seems unlikely given her 8 years of faithful service, or she intended for this notebook to be found. Before I could respond, the door opened to admit a woman of perhaps 35 years. Her dark hair pinned back severely, her grey dress modest but well cut. Her features were handsome rather than beautiful, but her eyes, large and remarkably dark, held an intelligence that commanded attention. "I beg your pardon," she said, her voice cool and precise. "I believe I left my notebook here earlier." Poirot smiled, holding out the notebook. "Mademoiselle Crane, I presume. I'm Henri Vauquelin, and this is my associate, Captain Hastings. Sir Reginald has been most gracious in showing us the facilities." Miss Crane accepted the notebook, her fingers brushing Poirot's for the briefest instant. "Sir Reginald mentioned he was expecting prospective clients. I trust your visit has been informative." "Most informative. Your employer speaks highly of your capabilities." "Sir Reginald is very kind." Her expression remained neutral, but I sensed something beneath the professional composure, a watchfulness, perhaps, or a guarded tension. "If you will excuse me, gentlemen, I have correspondence to attend to." When she had gone, Poirot stood very still, his gaze fixed upon the door through which she had departed. "What are you thinking, Poirot?" "I am thinking, mon ami, that Miss Helena Crane is a woman of considerable self-possession. She enters a room, retrieves her notebook from the very hands of a stranger, and betrays not the slightest embarrassment or concern." He stroked his moustache thoughtfully. "Either she is exactly what she appears, a competent professional with nothing to hide, or she is something else entirely." "You suspect her?" "I suspect everyone, Hastings. It is my métier." He turned as Sir Reginald re-entered the room. "Ah, Sir Reginald, I wonder if we might impose upon you for one small favour. I should very much like to meet Monsieur Blackwood before we conclude our visit." Sir Reginald hesitated. That is to say, his client meeting may have concluded, I suppose. If it is inconvenient, no, come, I shall introduce you myself. Charles Blackwood's office, when we reached it, proved to be empty of clients. The man himself sat behind a desk strewn with papers, a cigarette smouldering in an ashtray beside him. He was younger than I had expected, perhaps 40, with dark hair touched by grey at the temples, and a face that might have been handsome were it not so haggard. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his collar, I noticed, was ever so slightly rumpled. "Charles, these gentlemen are considering becoming clients, Monsieur Vauquelin and Captain Hastings." Sir Reginald's tone carried a subtle warning. "I thought you might explain our investment philosophy." Blackwood rose, stubbing out his cigarette with a hand that trembled slightly. "Of course, delighted." His smile was strained. "Please, sit down." The conversation that followed was unremarkable, a recitation of investment principles that Blackwood delivered with mechanical competence. But throughout, I observed the signs of a man under considerable strain. The restless shifting in his chair, the frequent glances toward the door, the way his fingers drummed upon the desk when he thought we weren't watching. "You have been with the firm 15 years, I understand," Poirot said pleasantly. "A considerable tenure. Yes, I came up through the ranks, as it were. Not a family connection like Hartley, or blood like Geoffrey." Blackwood's laugh was hollow. But Sir Reginald was good enough to recognize ability when he saw it. "And you have been content here? No thought of striking out on your own?" The question seemed to strike a nerve. Blackwood's jaw tightened. "I have considered various options over the years, but one's circumstances are not always conducive to bold moves." He glanced at Sir Reginald. "Ashworth and Hartley has been my home. I am grateful for the opportunities I have been given." When we finally took our leave of the bank, emerging into the grey afternoon, Poirot walked in silence for several minutes, his brow furrowed in thought. "Well," I prompted at last, "what do your little grey cells make of it all?" "They make of it, Hastings, a most troubling picture." Poirot hailed a passing cab. "We have an ambitious son chafing under his father's authority. A solid partner who speaks of gambling with barely concealed contempt. A secretary of unusual composure who leaves sensitive materials where they might be found. And a desperate man with debts and trembling hands." "Blackwood certainly looks guilty," I said as we climbed into the cab. "The gambling, the nerves, the haggard appearance. He does he not?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Almost too guilty, one might say. The little grey cells, they are suspicious of the obvious, Hastings. They prefer the hidden truth to the apparent one." "Then who—" But Poirot raised a hand. "Not yet, mon ami. We have observed, we have listened, but we have not yet found the thread that binds these disparate elements. There is something I am missing, some connection that eludes me." He gazed out at the passing streets. "I must think. And while I think, we must wait. The traitor, whoever they are, will not remain passive forever. They will act, and when they act, they will reveal themselves." I little knew, as our cab rattled through the London streets, how prophetic those words would prove. Within 48 hours, the mystery of Ashworth and Hartley would take a far darker turn, one that would transform a case of financial sabotage into something far more terrible. Chapter 3. A Death in the City. 2 days passed without incident, days during which Poirot remained sequestered in our rooms, poring over financial documents Sir Reginald had discreetly provided. I confess I found little of interest in the endless columns of figures. but Poirot studied them with the intensity of a scholar examining ancient manuscripts. "There is a pattern here, Hastings," he murmured on the second evening, his coffee growing cold beside him. "Money moves in and out of certain accounts with peculiar regularity. Always small amounts, never enough to trigger scrutiny. But together—" He shook his head. "Someone has been very clever indeed. Can you trace where the money goes? That is the difficulty. The trail fragments, disperses, multiple accounts, multiple transactions, each designed to obscure the ultimate destination." Poirot set down his magnifying glass with a sigh. Whoever constructed this labyrinth possessed intimate knowledge of the bank's systems and considerable patience. The following morning, we were awakened by an urgent knocking upon our door. I opened it to find Sir Reginald's driver, his face pale with shock. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, you must come at once. There has been, that is to say—" "Sir Reginald," the man's voice faltered. "Sir Reginald is dead." The word struck me like a physical blow. Poirot, however, moved with swift purpose, already reaching for his coat. "When? How?" "Last night, sir. At the bank they found him this morning in his private office." The driver swallowed hard. "The police are there now. They say he took his own life." We rode in grim silence through the grey London morning, the streets crowded with clerks and shopkeepers going about their daily business, oblivious to the tragedy that had unfolded in their midst. When we arrived at Ashworth and Hartley, a uniformed constable stood guard at the door, and the bank's staff huddled in anxious clusters upon the pavement. Inside, we were met by a familiar figure. Inspector Jameson of Scotland Yard, a competent if unimaginative officer with whom Poirot had collaborated on previous occasions. "Monsieur Poirot," Jameson's expression was guarded. "I might have known you'd appear. What's your connection to this business?" "Sir Reginald engaged my services 3 days ago. He feared someone within the bank meant him harm." Poirot's voice was grave. "It appears his fears were justified." "Justified?" "The man shot himself, Poirot. Revolver in his hand, powder burns on his temple, door locked from the inside, classic suicide." Jameson shrugged. "Tragic, but straightforward." "Nothing, Inspector, is ever straightforward. Permit me to view the scene." Jameson hesitated, then nodded. "Very well, but don't touch anything." Sir Reginald's office presented a tableau of undeniable horror. The great man sat slumped in his leather chair behind the mahogany desk, his head fallen to one side, a dark stain spreading across the blotter beneath him. In his right hand, the fingers still loosely curled around the grip, lay a small revolver. Poirot stood in the doorway for a long moment, his dark eyes taking in every detail. Then, with careful steps, he approached the desk. "The door was locked, you say?" "From the inside. The night watchman found him this morning when Sir Reginald failed to emerge for a scheduled meeting. Had to break down the door. The windows? Latched from within. Second floor? No balcony, no fire escape, no way in or out, except through that door." Poirot circled the desk slowly, his gaze moving from the body to the surrounding furniture to the floor. He paused beside Sir Reginald's chair, bending to examine something I could not see. "The revolver, it belongs to Sir Reginald." "According to his son, yes. Kept it in his desk drawer for protection. A Webley, standard issue from his service days." "Ah," Poirot straightened. "And there is a note, I presume. The suicide note that confirms the tragic intention." Jameson produced a folded sheet of paper from his pocket. "Found on the desk. The handwriting matches Sir Reginald's. We've already confirmed that." Poirot took the note, reading aloud, I can bear the shame no longer. The errors were mine. I see no other way. Forgive me. R.A. He studied the paper, holding it up to the grey light from the window. Brief, to the point, final. Like I said, straightforward. And yet, Poirot turned to face the inspector, his expression troubled. Sir Reginald came to me 3 days ago, convinced someone was sabotaging his bank. He feared for his reputation, yes, but he was determined to fight. He engaged Hercule Poirot to unmask the traitor. Poirot's voice sharpened. Does this sound like a man contemplating suicide? Desperate men do desperate things. Perhaps he discovered the truth was worse than he feared. Perhaps he was the one behind the irregularities all along. No. Poirot shook his head firmly. The little grey cells, they reject this theory absolutely. Sir Reginald Ashworth was a proud man, too proud to steal from his own institution, too proud to flee from scandal. He would have faced exposure with dignity, not a bullet. Then what are you suggesting? Poirot's gaze returned to the body. I am suggesting, Inspector, that this scene, so perfect, so complete, is a fabrication. Sir Reginald Ashworth did not take his own life. He was murdered. The word fell into the silence like a stone into still water. Jameson's face reddened. Murder? In a locked room with no other exit? How exactly would that work? That, mon ami, is what we must discover. Poirot began another circuit of the room, his eyes missing nothing. Tell me, who was the last person to see Sir Reginald alive? Jameson consulted his notebook. His secretary, Miss Crane. She brought him his evening coffee at 6:30, then left for the night. The night watchman confirmed she departed the building at 7:15. And Sir Reginald remained alone. As far as we know, the watchman made his rounds every hour, saw the light under Sir Reginald's door at 8, at 9, at 10, at 11 the light was out. He assumed Sir Reginald had gone home by the back entrance, but he had not. No, the night watchman admits he didn't actually check the office, just saw the light was off and assumed. Poirot nodded slowly. He had reached the window now, and stood examining the latch with minute attention. This window, it overlooks what precisely? The alley behind the building. Nothing there but dustbins and a service entrance? And the service entrance, it is locked at night? Yes, the night watchman has the only key. Poirot turned from the window, his brow furrowed. I should like to examine that service entrance, and I should like to speak with everyone who was present in the building yesterday evening. Now look here, Poirot. Inspector! Poirot's voice was quiet but firm. A man has been murdered. A man who came to me for protection, whom I failed to save. I intend to discover the truth, with or without your cooperation, but I would prefer with. Jameson held his gaze for a long moment, then sighed. Very well, but I want to be kept informed of anything you find. Naturellement. We descended to the ground floor, where the staff had gathered in the main banking hall. I observed their faces as we entered. Shock, grief, fear, and beneath it all, the unmistakable tension of people wondering if they were suspected. Geoffrey Ashworth stood apart from the others, his face ashen. Gone was the confident young man who had spoken of innovation and change. In his place stood a son confronting the sudden, violent loss of his father. Monsieur Vauquelin, or should I say Monsieur Poirot? Geoffrey's voice was hollow. Father told me the truth last night. He said you were investigating the irregularities. He informed you of my involvement? Yes, he said, Geoffrey's voice caught. He said he trusted you to find the truth. He was confident you would expose the traitor. His hands clenched at his sides, and now he is dead. Some bloody good your investigation did him. Geoffrey. Philip Hartley stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on the young man's arm. This serves nothing. Monsieur Poirot is here to help. Help? My father is dead, Philip, shot in his own office, and the police say— Geoffrey's face contorted. They say he killed himself, that he was responsible for the missing money, that everything he built, everything he stood for, was a lie. It is not true, Poirot said quietly. Your father did not take his own life. He was murdered. The word rippled through the assembled staff like wind through wheat. I saw Miss Crane's composure flicker for the briefest instant, a tightening around the eyes, quickly suppressed. Beside her, old Whitmore removed his spectacles and polished them with trembling hands. Murdered? Geoffrey stared at Poirot. But the door was locked. How? That I do not yet know, but I will discover it. Poirot surveyed the room. I must speak with each of you in turn. Someone in this building knows something, perhaps without realizing its significance. The smallest detail may prove crucial. Use the partners' conference room, Hartley offered. It is private. Merci. I shall begin with you, Monsieur Hartley, if you would be so kind. The interviews that followed consumed the better part of the morning. Hartley was cooperative, but offered little of substance. He had left the bank at 5 o'clock, dined at his club, and spent the evening reading. His alibi was confirmed by the club's porter. Geoffrey's account was more illuminating. He had remained at the bank until nearly 7, working on a proposal for new investment strategies. He had seen Miss Crane leave at 7:15 and had departed himself shortly thereafter. Did you speak with your father before you left? Geoffrey hesitated. Briefly, we argued. About what? The same thing we always argued about, the future of the bank, my ideas, his caution. Geoffrey's jaw tightened. I told him he was living in the past. He told me I was impatient and reckless. It was not our finest moment. And those were the last words you spoke to him? The colour drained from Geoffrey's face. Yes, God help me, yes. Charles Blackwood was next. The man appeared even more haggard than before, his hands shaking visibly as he lit a cigarette. I left at 4 o'clock, he said. I had an appointment. What manner of appointment? Blackwood's eyes darted away. A personal matter. Monsieur Blackwood. Poirot's voice hardened. A man has been murdered. This is not the moment for evasions. I was meeting someone about my debts. The words came out in a rush. A moneylender. I've been trying to arrange terms, to pay back what I owe. Sir Reginald gave me 6 months to make things right, and the time is nearly up. Can this moneylender confirm your presence? Yes. His name is Marcus Fletcher. He operates out of premises in Soho. Blackwood stubbed out his cigarette with vicious force. I know how this looks. I owed money. I was desperate. But I didn't kill Sir Reginald. He was the only person who believed I could redeem myself. Why would I destroy my last chance? Miss Crane was the final interview of the morning. She entered the conference room with the same cool composure I had observed before, taking her seat with the precision of one accustomed to order. You brought Sir Reginald his evening coffee at 6:30, Poirot began. Yes, it was his custom. He preferred to work late, and the coffee helped him maintain his concentration. How did he seem? Preoccupied. He had been that way for weeks, ever since the difficulties began. Miss Crane's dark eyes met Poirot's steadily, but not despairing. if that is what you are asking. He was troubled, certainly, but Sir Reginald was not a man who surrendered to despair. And you noticed nothing unusual? No visitors? No disturbances? Nothing. When I left, he was working at his desk, reviewing documents. He said good night. I said good night. That was all. Poirot was silent for a moment. Miss Crane, you have served Sir Reginald for 8 years. In that time, you must have observed much. I have observed that he was a good man, honourable, devoted to the bank and to his clients. Her voice wavered slightly, the first crack in her composure. He did not deserve this. No, Poirot agreed softly. He did not. When she had gone, Poirot sat in silence, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. What now? I asked. Now, Hastings, we examine the service entrance, and then we think. He rose, his expression grave. The locked room presents a puzzle, but it is not insoluble. Nothing is insoluble to the little grey cells when properly applied. The question is not how, the question is why. And the answer to that question lies somewhere in this building, hidden among the ledgers and the lies. We made our way to the rear of the building, where a narrow door opened onto the alley Jameson had mentioned. Poirot examined the lock, the frame, the surrounding walls. Hastings, he pointed to the ground. What do you see? I looked down. The alley was paved with cobblestones, damp from the morning fog. But near the door, I noticed a faint mark, a smear of something dark against the grey stone. Is that oil? Very good. Poirot knelt, touching the mark with his fingertip. Fresh, and see here, a partial footprint, pointing towards the door. He straightened, his eyes gleaming. Someone was here last night, Hastings. Someone who should not have been. The killer? Perhaps. Poirot's gaze travelled up the wall to where a drainpipe ran past a second-floor window. Or perhaps merely the method by which the killer entered and left. Chapter 4. The Locked Room Unravelled. The drainpipe commanded Poirot's attention for several minutes. He examined it from base to summit, noting the brackets that secured it to the wall, the patches of rust upon its surface, and, most significantly, a fresh scrape upon one of the upper brackets, where the paint had been disturbed. Someone climbed this pipe recently, I observed. So it would appear. Poirot stepped back, surveying the wall. The window above. That is Sir Reginald's office, no? I believe so. The second from the left. And Inspector Jameson assured us it was latched from within. Poirot stroked his moustache thoughtfully. A window latched from within. A door locked from within. And yet a murderer entered, killed, and departed, leaving no trace of his passage. Except the oil mark. Précisément. The oil mark and the footprint. These are the threads we must follow. Poirot turned abruptly. Come, Hastings. We must return to Sir Reginald's office. There is something I neglected to examine properly. We found Inspector Jameson still present, supervising the removal of Sir Reginald's body. The sight affected me more than I cared to admit. This proud, vital man reduced to a covered shape upon a stretcher. Inspector, Poirot said, I must examine the window once more. The window? I told you it was latched from inside. There's no way. Indulge me, if you please. Jameson shrugged and stepped aside. Poirot approached the window with the intensity of a surgeon preparing for an operation. He examined the latch first, a simple brass mechanism, unremarkable in design. Then he ran his fingers along the frame, the sill, the glass itself. Hastings, your penknife. I handed it over. Poirot inserted the blade into a tiny gap between the frame and the sill, a gap so small I had not even noticed it, and worked it gently back and forth. A moment later, he withdrew the blade. Upon it glistened a thin film of oil. "Voila," he murmured, "the same oil as in the alley below." "I don't understand," Jameson said. "What does oil have to do with anything?" Poirot straightened, his eyes alight with satisfaction. "The window latch, Inspector, is of a common design, one that can be manipulated from outside with sufficient skill and the proper tools. But it requires the frame to move smoothly, silently. Oil reduces friction and eliminates noise. You're saying someone oiled the window so they could open it from outside? I'm saying precisely that. Our killer prepared this room in advance, perhaps days before the murder. They climbed the drain pipe, applied oil to the window mechanism, and ensured they could gain entry when the moment came. But the latch was still secured when we found the body. Because our killer, having completed their work, departed the same way they entered, through the window. And as they left, they reached back and secured the latch from outside, using the same tool that allowed them to open it. Poirot produced his handkerchief and carefully wiped my penknife. A clever mechanism, Inspector, one that has fooled better men than you or I. And the locked door? The locked door is simplicity itself. Poirot crossed to the office door, examining it with renewed interest. A standard mortise lock, operated by key. Sir Reginald kept his key upon his person, yes? In his waistcoat pocket. We found it there. But there is, I presume, a spare key. One kept in Miss Crane's desk, perhaps, for emergencies. Jameson consulted his notebook. Yes, Miss Crane confirmed it. And when did you verify the spare key's location? A pause. This morning, after we found the body. Ah! Poirot's smile held no warmth. So it is entirely possible that the spare key was borrowed last night, used to lock the door after Sir Reginald was killed, and returned to its place before anyone thought to check. Jameson's face reddened. You're saying someone took the spare key, locked the door from inside, then escaped through the window? That is exactly what I'm saying. The locked room, Inspector, is an illusion. A stage trick designed to suggest suicide and divert suspicion from murder. I felt a chill despite the warmth of the office. The killer had planned meticulously, anticipating every detail. This was no crime of passion, no desperate act of a cornered man. This was calculated, deliberate, cold. Who had access to the spare key, I asked. An excellent question. Poirot turned to Jameson. We must establish this immediately. Who knew of the spare key's existence? Who could have taken it without arousing suspicion? Further investigation revealed that the spare key was kept in an unlocked drawer of Miss Crane's desk. A desk located in the outer office, accessible to anyone who worked in the building. In theory, any of our suspects could have obtained it. The field remains open, Poirot observed, as we departed the bank that afternoon. The locked room puzzle is solved, but we are no closer to identifying our killer. What about the footprint? Could we not match it to someone's shoe? A partial print, Hastings, and badly smeared. The police will attempt to match it, but I hold little hope. Poirot shook his head. No, we must approach this from a different direction. The method of murder has been established. Now we must turn our attention to the motive. We returned to our rooms in Whitehaven Mansions, where Poirot resumed his examination of Sir Reginald's financial documents. I confess my attention wandered. The columns of figures held little meaning for me. But Poirot worked with unwavering concentration, occasionally making notes in his precise handwriting. "Hastings," he said suddenly, "look at this." I leaned over his shoulder. He was pointing to an entry in what appeared to be a ledger of client accounts. This entry here, a transfer of £5,000 to an account in Geneva, and here another transfer, £3,000, to an account in Brussels, both made within the past 6 months. Embezzlement? Someone was moving money abroad? So it would appear, but observe the authorization signatures. Poirot tapped the page. Each transfer was approved by Sir Reginald himself. That's impossible. Sir Reginald would never— Exactly. Sir Reginald would never authorize the theft of his client's funds, which means one of two things. Either he was deceived into signing these authorizations, or Poirot's eyes narrowed, or the signatures are forgeries. Forgeries? But Inspector Jameson said the handwriting on the suicide note matched Sir Reginald's. Matched, yes, but a skilled forger can replicate handwriting with remarkable accuracy, especially if they have access to numerous samples. Poirot gathered the documents. We must have these signatures examined by an expert. If they prove to be forgeries, we will have taken a significant step toward identifying our killer. The following morning, we visited a handwriting analyst of Poirot's acquaintance, a meticulous gentleman named Professor Harrington, who operated from cramped offices near the British Museum. He examined the documents through a powerful magnifying glass, making occasional sounds of interest. "The transfers," he said at last, "are unquestionably forged. The hand is similar to Sir Reginald's, but the pressure points are wrong. See here," he pointed to a curved letter. "A natural hand lifts slightly at the end of the stroke. This hand presses down. Someone was trying too hard to be accurate." "And the suicide note?" Poirot asked. Professor Harrington studied the note for a long moment. "Also forged. The same hand as the transfer authorizations, I would say. Whoever created these documents created them all." Poirot's eyes gleamed with triumph. "You are certain?" "Absolutely certain. I would stake my professional reputation upon it." We departed the professor's office with fresh energy. The case had shifted beneath our feet. What had appeared to be a straightforward financial fraud had revealed itself as something far more complex. "The killer forged Sir Reginald's signature," I said as we walked. "They created false authorizations to cover their embezzlement. And when Sir Reginald discovered the fraud, they killed him," Poirot finished, "and attempted to disguise the murder as suicide, using another forgery, the suicide note, to support the illusion. But who? Who among our suspects possesses the skill to forge handwriting so convincingly? That, mon ami, is what we must now discover." Poirot hailed a cab. We returned to Ashworth and Hartley. "There is someone I wish to interview again. Someone whose story, I suspect, is not entirely complete." The bank was quieter than on our previous visits, the atmosphere subdued by grief and scandal. Black crepe adorned the entrance, and the clerks spoke in hushed voices. Geoffrey Ashworth met us in the foyer, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Monsieur Poirot, have you discovered something? I have discovered that your father did not sign the documents authorizing the fraudulent transfers. They were forged." Poirot watched Geoffrey's reaction carefully. "I have also confirmed that the suicide note was forged by the same hand." Geoffrey staggered slightly, reaching for a nearby pillar to steady himself. "Forged? Then father truly was innocent?" "Of the financial irregularities, yes. He was a victim, not a perpetrator." "Thank God!" Geoffrey's voice cracked. I always knew he would never." He collected himself with visible effort. What does this mean for the investigation? It means, Monsieur Ashworth, that we are seeking someone with intimate knowledge of the bank's operations, access to Sir Reginald's signature samples, and considerable skill in replicating handwriting. Poirot paused. Is Miss Crane available? I should like to speak with her again. Geoffrey's expression flickered. Helena. Yes, she's in the outer office, but surely you don't suspect. I suspect everyone until the truth is known. Poirot moved past him. Come, Hastings. Miss Crane sat at her desk, surrounded by stacks of correspondence. She rose as we approached, her dark eyes wary. Monsieur Poirot, how may I help you? A few additional questions. Mademoiselle, if you would be so kind. Poirot settled into the chair beside her desk, his manner deceptively casual. You have served Sir Reginald for 8 years. In that time, I imagine you handled much of his correspondence. All of his correspondence, monsieur. Drafting letters, managing appointments, maintaining records. And you became familiar with his handwriting, his signature? A pause, barely perceptible, but Poirot noticed. I saw his eyes sharpen. Naturally. I often had occasion to verify documents bearing his signature. To verify or to replicate? Miss Crane's composure held, but something shifted in her eyes. I'm not sure I understand your meaning. Then permit me to be direct. Poirot leaned forward. The transfer authorizations that moved £30,000 to foreign accounts, they were forged. The suicide note, also forged by the same hand. He let the words hang in the air. A hand intimately familiar with Sir Reginald's writing. You are accusing me. I am making an observation. You possessed both the access and the skill. You were the last person to see Sir Reginald alive. You brought him coffee that evening. Coffee that might have contained something to ensure he did not resist his attacker. Miss Crane rose from her chair, her face pale but composed. I did not kill Sir Reginald. I did not forge those documents, and I certainly did not poison his coffee. Then you will not object to having your handwriting examined by an expert. I will provide any sample you require. Her voice was steady, but her hands clasped before her trembled slightly. Because I am innocent, Monsieur Poirot. Whatever evidence you think you have, you are wrong. Poirot studied her for a long moment. Perhaps we shall see. As we left the bank, I turned to Poirot. She seemed genuinely frightened. Do you believe her? I believe, Hastings, that Miss Helena Crane is hiding something. Whether that something is murder, I cannot yet say. He paused on the pavement, his gaze distant. There is a piece missing, a connection I have not yet made. The little grey cells sense it, but they cannot quite grasp it. What sort of connection? The motive, Hastings, always the motive. Why would Miss Crane, loyal servant of 8 years, suddenly turn to embezzlement and murder? What changed? What precipitated this betrayal? Perhaps she was always corrupt. Perhaps she concealed her true nature. Perhaps, but Poirot's tone was doubtful. Or perhaps we are looking at this case from entirely the wrong angle. Perhaps the obvious suspect is, once again, precisely what she appears. A distraction designed to divert our attention from the true killer. Chapter 5. The Breakthrough. The following day brought no immediate revelations. Poirot spent the morning in contemplation, seated in his favourite armchair, with his eyes half closed and his fingers steepled beneath his chin. I knew better than to disturb him when he was in such a state. The little grey cells were at work, and interruption would be unwelcome. Shortly after noon, a messenger arrived bearing an envelope with the Ashworth and Hartley seal. Poirot opened it with his silver letter knife and read the contents with raised eyebrows. We are summoned, Hastings. Geoffrey Ashworth requests our presence at the bank this afternoon. He has discovered something among his father's private papers that he believes may be significant. What sort of something? He does not say, but his tone suggests urgency. Poirot rose, reaching for his coat and hat. Come, let us see what the young Monsieur Ashworth has uncovered. We found Geoffrey in his father's office. Now, his office, I supposed, though the transition seemed to weigh heavily upon him. He sat behind the great mahogany desk, looking diminished by its grandeur, a folder of papers spread before him. Monsieur Poirot, thank you for coming so quickly. Geoffrey gestured for us to sit. I've been going through Father's private correspondence, things he kept separate from the bank's official records, and I found this. He slid a sheet of paper across the desk. Poirot took it, and I leaned in to read over his shoulder. The letter was dated 3 months earlier and addressed to Sir Reginald. Its contents made my blood run cold. Sir Reginald, I know what you did. I know about the Hartley fortune and how it was really built. I know about 1909. Pay what I ask, or the truth becomes public. $10,000 to the account specified below. You have 1 month. A friend blackmail, I breathed. So it would appear. Poirot studied the letter intently. The handwriting, it is disguised. Block capitals, careful strokes, difficult to identify the author. But look at the date, Geoffrey said. 3 months ago. That's when the irregularities in the accounts began. Or at least, when Father first noticed them. You believe there is a connection? I believe Father was being blackmailed, and he paid. Perhaps from his own funds at first, but when those ran out... Geoffrey's voice hardened. Perhaps he was forced to make unauthorized transfers to meet the demands. Poirot shook his head slowly. No, Monsieur Ashworth. We have established that the transfer authorizations were forged. Your father did not sign them. Then the blackmailer forged them. They demanded money, and when Father refused, they took it themselves. A possibility. Poirot set down the letter. But this raises new questions. What is this secret from 1909? What did the blackmailer know that was worth £10,000? Geoffrey spread his hands helplessly. I have no idea. I was a child in 1909. Father never spoke of anything unusual from that time. The Hartley fortune, I said, recalling the letter's phrasing. It mentions how the Hartley fortune was really built. That suggests something about Philip Hartley's family. An astute observation, Hastings. Poirot rose from his chair. I must speak with Monsieur Hartley. And I must examine the bank's records from 1909. If a secret lies buried there, we must unearth it. We found Philip Hartley in his office, poring over maps and financial charts with his customary methodical attention. He looked up as we entered, his expression guarded. Monsieur Poirot, I had hoped you might have news. I have questions, Monsieur Hartley. Questions about the year 1909. Something flickered in Hartley's eyes, a shadow that passed too quickly for me to identify. 1909. That was a long time ago. I was barely 20. And yet I suspect you remember it well. Poirot settled into a chair uninvited. A blackmail letter has been discovered among Sir Reginald's papers. It references 1909 and the true origins of the Hartley fortune. What can you tell me about this? Hartley was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. My grandfather founded this bank with Sir Reginald's grandfather. They were equal partners. But in 1909 there was a crisis. What manner of crisis? Financial. My grandfather had made some unwise investments. The bank was on the verge of collapse. Hartley's jaw tightened. Sir Reginald's father, the current Sir Reginald's father, that is, stepped in. He covered the losses from his own pocket. Saved the bank, saved my family. A noble act, a necessary one. If the bank had failed, both families would have been ruined. Hartley met Poirot's gaze. But there was a condition. My grandfather had to cede control, not officially, but practically. The Ashworths became the senior partners. The Hartleys became subordinate. And this arrangement has continued to the present day. Yes, my family's stake in the bank remains significant, but we have no real power. Every major decision requires Ashworth approval. A note of bitterness crept into Hartley's voice. I have spent my entire career in the shadow of that long-ago failure. Poirot nodded slowly. And who knew of this arrangement? Of the circumstances surrounding 1909? Very few. It was not the sort of thing either family wished to publicize. Sir Reginald knew, of course, and I knew. Beyond that, Hartley shrugged. The old records exist somewhere, I suppose, but who would bother to search for them? Someone did. Poirot rose. Someone discovered this secret and used it to blackmail Sir Reginald. The question is, who? We departed Hartley's office with new information, but no clear answers. The 1909 crisis provided context, but it did not identify our killer. Hartley himself has motive, I observed as we walked. He spoke of spending his career in the Ashworth's shadow. Perhaps he grew tired of subordination. Perhaps. But would he kill Sir Reginald to escape that subordination? Geoffrey now controls the bank. The Hartley position remains unchanged. Unless Hartley planned to expose the secret himself, to destroy the Ashworth reputation and reclaim control. An interesting theory, Hastings, but it does not explain the embezzlement. Why steal £30,000 if your aim is to discredit the Ashworths? The theft damages the bank itself, including the Hartley stake. I had no answer to that. We continued in silence until we reached the main banking hall, where old Whitmore sat at his accustomed desk, his pen moving steadily across a ledger. Poirot paused, studying the elderly clerk with renewed interest. Monsieur Whitmore, a moment of your time, if you please. Whitmore looked up, his sharp eyes wary behind their spectacles. Monsieur Poirot, how may I assist you? You have served this bank for 30 years. You knew Sir Reginald's father before him. I did. I began as a junior clerk in 1904, worked my way up. A note of pride entered Whitmore's voice. I have seen much in those years. Including the crisis of 1909? Whitmore's pen stopped moving. He set it down carefully, his expression unreadable. I remember 1909. Tell me what you remember. A long pause. Whitmore removed his spectacles, polishing them with a handkerchief, the same nervous gesture I had observed before. Old Mr. Hartley, Philip's grandfather, made some bad investments, foreign railways that never got built. The bank was exposed, badly exposed. Whitmore replaced his spectacles. Old Mr. Ashworth stepped in, covered the losses, saved everything. And the terms of that rescue? I was just a junior clerk, monsieur. I didn't know the details, but I knew the balance of power shifted. The Ashworths became the real masters of this institution. Who else knew of this? Who had access to the records? Whitmore hesitated. The records were kept in the archive room. Old files going back decades. Anyone with access to that room could have found them. And who has such access? The partners? Miss Crane? Another pause. And myself. Poirot thanked him, and we moved on. but I noticed my friend's expression had sharpened. Something Whitmore had said, or perhaps the way he had said it, had caught Poirot's attention. "You suspect Whitmore?" I asked quietly. "I suspect everyone, Hastings. But Whitmore is interesting. 30 years of service, intimate knowledge of the bank's history, access to the archives." Poirot stroked his moustache. "And did you observe his hands?" "His hands? Ink-stained, as one would expect of a clerk. But the stains were fresh, darker than the usual accumulation of daily work, as though he had been writing more than usual, practicing, perhaps. Practicing handwriting? Perhaps." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "We must examine those archive records, Hastings, and we must do so quickly." The archive room was located in the basement of the building, a dim, dusty space lined with shelves of aging documents. Miss Crane provided us with access, her manner stiff and wary since our previous confrontation. "The 1909 records should be in the third alcove," she said, "organized by year. Is there anything specific you're looking for?" "I shall know it when I find it, mademoiselle." She departed, leaving us alone among the accumulated paperwork of nearly a century and a half. Poirot moved methodically through the shelves, his fingers trailing along the spines of bound ledgers and boxes of correspondence. Here. He withdrew a slim folder, its cover faded with age. 1909. Private correspondence between the partners. We carried it to a small table beneath a gas lamp. Poirot opened the folder and began to read, his expression growing more intense with each page. "Hastings, look at this." The document he indicated was a letter, old, yellowed, but still legible. It was written in a feminine hand, addressed to old Mr. Ashworth. "My dearest Richard, I cannot continue this deception. My conscience will not permit it. I know what you did to secure the Hartley cooperation, the false ledger entries, the manufactured evidence of malfeasance. You did not rescue the bank. You engineered a crisis to seize control. I will keep silent for now, for the sake of our families. But you must know that I know. And someday the truth will emerge. Your sister, Eleanor. Mon Dieu," Poirot breathed. "The Ashworths did not save the bank, they sabotaged it." "What?" "The crisis of 1909 was manufactured. Old Mr. Ashworth created false evidence to make it appear the Hartleys had endangered the bank through bad investments. He then rescued the institution, seizing control in the process." Poirot shook his head slowly. "A monstrous deception, one that has shaped this bank for generations. And someone discovered this. Someone found this letter." "Exactly." Poirot carefully returned the letter to its folder. "But this raises a new question. Eleanor Ashworth. She was Sir Reginald's aunt, yes? His father's sister?" "I suppose so." "And what became of her?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "We must discover this. We must trace the line of knowledge, who knew of this letter, who had reason to use it." As we emerged from the archive room, we encountered Geoffrey Ashworth in the corridor. His face was drawn with anxiety. "Monsieur Poirot, I've been looking for you. There's been a development." "What manner of development?" "It's Miss Crane." Geoffrey's voice was strained. "She's disappeared." We hastened to the outer office, where a small crowd had gathered. Miss Crane's desk was empty, her chair pushed back, as though she had risen in haste. Her coat and hat remained on their hooks, but the woman herself was nowhere to be found. "When was she last seen?" Poirot demanded. "About an hour ago," one of the junior clerks answered. "She said she was going to the archive room to fetch some documents. She never came back." Poirot and I exchanged glances. We had been in the archive room for the past hour. We had not seen Miss Crane. "There is another entrance to the archives?" Poirot asked sharply. "Yes, a service stair at the far end. It leads to the alley behind the building." The same alley where we had found the oil mark and footprint. The same alley with the drainpipe leading to Sir Reginald's window. "She has fled," I said. "She knew we were closing in and she ran." "Perhaps." But Poirot's expression was troubled. "Or perhaps, Hastings, she has been silenced, as Sir Reginald was silenced. You think she's in danger?" "I think that someone in this building is very frightened. Frightened enough to kill once. Frightened enough, perhaps, to kill again." Poirot turned to Geoffrey. "We must search the premises. Every room, every closet, every corner. If Miss Crane is still here, we must find her." "And if she isn't?" Poirot's face was grim. "Then we must pray we are not already too late." Chapter 6. The Truth Emerges. The search of Ashworth and Hartley's premises consumed the remainder of the afternoon. Every office was examined, every storage room opened, every cupboard and alcove inspected. Miss Helena Crane was not found. Inspector Jameson arrived within the hour, his face grim. "Another disappearance, Poirot. This case grows more tangled by the minute." "It does not grow tangled, Inspector. It grows clear." Poirot stood in the centre of the main banking hall, his dark eyes sweeping the assembled staff. "Miss Crane's disappearance is not a complication. It is a confirmation. Someone fears what she knows. Someone has acted to silence her. Or she's guilty and she's run. That remains a possibility. But consider, Inspector, Miss Crane knew we suspected her. She knew her handwriting would be examined. If she were guilty, why remain at the bank at all? Why not flee immediately?" Jameson had no answer to that. "No," Poirot continued, "Miss Crane remained because she believed herself safe, because she knew she was innocent and trusted that the truth would exonerate her. Her sudden disappearance suggests that someone else grew frightened. Someone who could not risk what Miss Crane might reveal." "Then who?" "That, Inspector, is what we must now determine." Poirot turned to address the room. "I require everyone to remain in the building. No one is to leave until I have completed my inquiries." Geoffrey Ashworth stepped forward. "Monsieur Poirot, surely you don't suspect—" "I suspect everyone, Monsieur Ashworth, including you." Poirot's voice was not unkind, but neither did it brook argument. "A woman has vanished. Your father is dead. The truth must be uncovered, whatever the cost." We retired to the partners' conference room, where Poirot sat in silence for several long minutes, his fingers pressed to his temples. I knew this posture. The little grey cells were assembling their evidence, arranging the pieces into a coherent pattern. "Hastings," he said at last, "let us review what we know." "Very well." I settled into a chair opposite him. Sir Reginald was murdered in a locked room, a room made accessible through an oiled window and a borrowed key. The murder was disguised as suicide using a forged note. Continue. The same forger created false transfer authorizations, embezzling £30,000 over 18 months. Sir Reginald was being blackmailed over a secret from 1909. The fact that his grandfather manufactured the Hartley crisis to seize control of the bank. And this secret was known to whom? Eleanor Ashworth, Sir Reginald's aunt, wrote of it in a letter. That letter was kept in the archives, accessible to the partners, Miss Crane and Whitmore. Bon. Poirot nodded slowly. Now consider, who had motive to use this secret against Sir Reginald? Philip Hartley. If he discovered the truth about 1909, he might have felt justified in demanding compensation, or in exacting revenge? A possibility, but Hartley is a proud man. Would he stoop to blackmail and embezzlement? Would he murder the man whose family wronged his? I hesitated. It seems out of character. Précisément. Hartley is not our killer. Poirot rose, pacing the length of the room. Consider instead the nature of the crime. The forgeries required intimate knowledge of Sir Reginald's handwriting. The embezzlement required access to the bank's financial systems. The murder required knowledge of the building's layout. The spare key, the window mechanism, the drain pipe. Miss Crane possessed all of these. She did. But Miss Crane also possessed something else. 8 years of loyal service, a spotless reputation, and no apparent motive. Poirot stopped before the window, gazing out at the grey London sky. We have been assuming that the forger and the murderer are the same person. But what if they are not? I don't follow. Consider Hastings. The embezzlement began 18 months ago. The blackmail began 3 months ago. The murder occurred 3 days ago. Poirot turned to face me. These are 3 distinct phases of the crime. What if they represent 3 distinct intentions, or 3 distinct actors? You mean a conspiracy? Perhaps. Or perhaps a crime that evolved, that grew beyond its original purpose. Poirot resumed his pacing. Someone discovered the 1909 secret and began blackmailing Sir Reginald. When Sir Reginald refused to pay, they resorted to forgery, stealing the money directly. And when Sir Reginald discovered the theft and engaged Hercule Poirot to investigate, they killed him to prevent exposure. Exactement. Poirot's eyes gleamed. But this sequence raises a crucial question. The blackmail letter demanded £10,000. The embezzlement totaled £30,000. Why steal 3 times what was demanded? I had no answer. Poirot smiled grimly. Because the blackmail was not the true purpose. The blackmail was a smokescreen, a means of explaining the financial irregularities if they were discovered. I was being extorted, Sir Reginald might have said. The money was paid to a blackmailer. But Sir Reginald never paid the blackmail, did he? The letter demanded payment within 1 month. 3 months have passed. Then the blackmail was refused. Refused, yes, because Sir Reginald knew the secret would destroy him either way. Pay or not pay, the truth about 1909 would emerge. So he chose a third option. He engaged a detective to find the blackmailer and stop them. Poirot shook his head sadly. A brave choice. A fatal choice. A knock at the door interrupted our deliberations. One of the junior clerks entered, his face pale. Monsieur Poirot, we've found something. In the service stairwell. We followed him to the narrow staircase connecting the archive room to the alley behind the building. Halfway down, caught on a nail protruding from the wooden banister, hung a scrap of grey fabric. Miss Crane's dress, I said. She was wearing grey. Poirot examined the fabric without touching it. She came this way, willingly or otherwise. He descended the remaining steps, emerging into the alley we had examined before. The cobblestones were wet from a recent rain, but near the service door I could see fresh marks, scuffed footprints as though someone had struggled. There! Poirot pointed to the ground. 2 sets of prints, one smaller, Miss Crane's, one larger, her abductor's. They lead toward the street. A vehicle, most likely. She was taken away. Poirot's expression darkened. We must find her. Hastings! If she still lives, she is in grave danger. If she is dead. He did not complete the thought. We returned to the banking hall. where the staff remained gathered under Inspector Jameson's watchful eye. Poirot surveyed them slowly, his gaze lingering on each face in turn. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the marble space. "A woman has been abducted from these premises. Her life may depend upon what happens in the next few hours. I ask you now, if anyone knows anything at all, that might help us find Miss Crane, speak now." Silence. The clerks exchanged nervous glances. Geoffrey Ashworth stared at the floor. Philip Hartley stood rigid, his face unreadable. And then, from the back of the room, a voice spoke. "I know where she is." All eyes turned to Charles Blackwood. The man stepped forward, his face haggard but determined. "I know where she is," he repeated, "because I know who took her." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Explain yourself, monsieur." Blackwood drew a shaky breath. "I've been watching, observing. I knew someone was behind the irregularities, someone inside the bank. I didn't know who, but I was determined to find out. After Sir Reginald's death, I began paying closer attention." "And what did you observe?" "Small things, inconsistencies. The way certain people behaved when they thought no one was watching." Blackwood's gaze shifted to the far side of the room. "This afternoon, I saw someone follow Miss Crane to the archives. I saw them return alone 15 minutes later with something hidden under their coat." "Who?" Jameson demanded. "Who did you see?" Blackwood pointed. "Him. James Whitmore." A collective gasp rippled through the assembly. The elderly clerk stood frozen, his spectacles glinting in the gaslight. "That's absurd," Whitmore said, his voice steady despite the accusation. "I've served this bank for 30 years. Why would I? Because of Eleanor Ashworth," Poirot said quietly. Whitmore's composure cracked. A tremor passed through his thin frame. "What did you say?" "Eleanor Ashworth, Sir Reginald's aunt, the woman who wrote the letter exposing the 1909 fraud." Poirot advanced slowly, his eyes fixed on the elderly clerk. "She was your mother, was she not?" The silence that followed was absolute. Every person in the room seemed to hold their breath. "How?" Whitmore's voice emerged as a whisper. "How did you know?" "I did not know. I deduced." Poirot's voice was gentle, but relentless. "You told us you began working here in 1904, the same year Eleanor Ashworth would have been a young woman. The Ashworth family records would show that Eleanor left the family home under unusual circumstances. A scandal, perhaps. A child born out of wedlock." Whitmore's face contorted with old pain. "She was cast out, disowned, because she dared to love a man her family considered beneath her, a clerk in their own bank. Your father, oh yes, my father." Whitmore's voice grew stronger, fueled by decades of suppressed rage. "They destroyed him, dismissed him without references. He died in poverty when I was 12, and my mother, Eleanor Ashworth, spent her remaining years in a boarding house in Cheapside, forgotten by the family that should have protected her." "But she told you the truth," Poirot said. "Before she died, she told you what she knew about 1909, about how the Ashworths had cheated the Hartleys, about the letter she had written. She told me everything." Whitmore's eyes blazed. "The great Ashworth fortune, built on lies and theft. The noble family reputation, maintained by crushing anyone who threatened to expose them." He laughed bitterly. "And I was supposed to serve them. Bow and scrape and be grateful for the privilege of employment. So you planned your revenge. I waited. 30 years, I waited. I learned their systems, their secrets, their weaknesses. And when the time was right, I acted. Whitmore straightened, a terrible pride in his bearing. The blackmail was just the beginning. I wanted Sir Reginald to know, to understand that someone knew the truth about his precious family. But he refused to pay. Refused to acknowledge what his grandfather had done. So you forged the transfer authorizations. You stole the money yourself. It was owed to me, to my mother's memory. £30,000, a fraction of what the Ashworths stole from the Hartleys, from my father, from everyone they ever crushed beneath their polished boots. And when Sir Reginald engaged me to investigate, I knew it was only a matter of time. Whitmore's voice dropped. I didn't want to kill him. I wanted him to suffer, to watch his empire crumble, his reputation destroyed, but he forced my hand. He was getting too close. So you climbed the drainpipe. You entered through the oiled window. You murdered him and made it appear a suicide. Yes. And Miss Crane, where is she? Whitmore hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. She discovered me. This afternoon, in the archives. She saw me returning my mother's letter to its folder. I had been reading it, remembering. His voice cracked. She understood immediately. She said she would tell you. So you silenced her. I didn't mean to hurt her. I just needed time to disappear, to escape. Whitmore's shoulders sagged. She's in the coal cellar, bound and gagged, but unharmed. I swear it. Jameson was already moving, barking orders to his constables. Within minutes they had descended to the cellar and returned with Miss Helena Crane, dishevelled and frightened, but, as Whitmore had promised, unharmed. She caught sight of Whitmore, and her expression hardened. "You killed Sir Reginald," she said, her voice shaking. "He trusted you. 30 years of trust, and you—" "He was an Ashworth," Whitmore spat. "They deserve no trust, no loyalty, only justice. Justice!" Poirot's voice cut through the tension. "You speak of justice, Monsieur Whitmore, but what justice is this? Sir Reginald did not perpetrate the fraud of 1909. His grandfather did. Geoffrey Ashworth was a child when these events occurred. Miss Crane was an innocent bystander. They benefited from the crime. They lived in luxury while my mother died in squalor. And so you became what you claimed to despise, a thief, a forger, a murderer." Poirot shook his head slowly. "The little grey cells, they understand your pain, Monsieur Whitmore. But they cannot condone your actions. Justice perverted is not justice at all. It is merely vengeance wearing a mask." Whitmore had no response. The constables stepped forward, securing his wrists in handcuffs. As they led him away, he turned one final time to look at the assembled staff, the bank he had served for 3 decades, the institution he had sought to destroy. "Tell them," he said, his voice hollow. "Tell them the truth about 1909. Let the world know what the Ashworths really are." The door closed behind him, and he was gone. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The drawing-room of Ashworth and Hartley had witnessed many gatherings over its long history. Celebrations of financial triumphs, solemn readings of wills, the quiet negotiations that shaped fortunes and dynasties. But I venture to say that none had been quite like the assembly that convened there 3 days after James Whitmore's arrest. Poirot had requested the meeting, and Geoffrey Ashworth, now firmly established as the bank's senior partner, had agreed without hesitation. The young man had aged visibly in the weeks since his father's death, the brash confidence of ambition tempered by the weight of sudden responsibility. Present were all the principal figures in the drama. Geoffrey himself, pale but composed, Philip Hartley, his stolid face betraying nothing of his thoughts, Charles Blackwood, looking somewhat less haggard than before, and Miss Helena Crane restored to her customary composure, though a faint bruise upon her wrist testified to her ordeal. Inspector Jameson stood near the door, notebook in hand, while Poirot occupied his customary position before the marble fireplace, where a modest fire crackled against the February chill. "I have asked you here," Poirot began, "not to revisit the details of Monsieur Whitmore's crime. Those are now matters for the courts, but to address certain questions that remain unanswered. Questions of justice. Questions of truth." Geoffrey shifted uncomfortably. "Monsieur Poirot, I'm not certain what more there is to discuss. Whitmore confessed. He will hang for what he did. Surely that is the end of it." "The end of the criminal matter, perhaps, but not the end of the moral one?" Poirot's dark eyes swept the room. "James Whitmore committed terrible acts, theft, forgery, murder. For these he will pay the ultimate price, but his crimes did not arise from nothing. They were born of an older injustice, one that has never been acknowledged, let alone redressed." "You speak of 1909, Hartley said quietly. "I do." Poirot nodded. "The truth is now known to all of you. In 1909, the senior Monsieur Ashworth, Sir Reginald's grandfather, manufactured a financial crisis to seize control of this institution from his Hartley partners. He created false evidence of malfeasance, rescued the bank from a disaster of his own making, and reduced the Hartley family to subordinate status." Hartley's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. This fraud was witnessed and documented by Eleanor Ashworth, Sir Reginald's aunt. When she attempted to expose the truth, she was silenced, cast out from her family, disowned, left to raise her illegitimate son in poverty and shame. Poirot paused. That son was James Whitmore. "We know all this," Geoffrey said impatiently. "What is your point?" "My point, Monsieur Ashworth, is that justice is not a simple thing. Whitmore's vengeance was wrong. Terribly, unforgivably wrong. But the injustice that spawned it was also wrong. Two wrongs do not cancel each other. They compound." Miss Crane spoke for the first time. "What would you have us do, Monsieur Poirot? We cannot undo the past." "No, but you can acknowledge it. You can make what amends are possible." Poirot turned to Geoffrey. "Your family built its fortune on a lie that destroyed the Hartley family's rightful position, destroyed Eleanor Ashworth's life, destroyed the life of the man who became James Whitmore. You have inherited that fortune. What will you do with it?" Geoffrey was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful, more measured than I had heard it before. "I have been thinking about this since Whitmore's confession, about what Father would have wanted." He glanced at Hartley. "Father never knew the truth about 1909. He believed, as I believed, that our family had acted honourably, that the Ashworth reputation was deserved. And now? Now I know differently." Geoffrey straightened in his chair. "Philip, your family was cheated. There is no other word for it. The balance of power in this partnership should never have shifted as it did." Hartley's expression remained guarded. "What are you proposing?" "A restoration, a true partnership, equal in authority and equal in profit, the way it should have been all along." Geoffrey extended his hand. "I cannot undo what my grandfather did, but I can undo its effects. Will you accept?" Hartley stared at the outstretched hand. For a moment, I thought he might refuse, the old resentment too deeply ingrained to release. But then slowly, he reached out and clasped Geoffrey's hand in his own. "I accept," he said simply, "for my family's honour and for the future of this institution." Poirot nodded with evident satisfaction. "Bien. A wound begins to heal, but there is another matter still to be addressed." "Another matter?" Geoffrey released Hartley's hand, frowning. "Eleanor Ashworth's legacy. She died in poverty, forgotten by the family that should have protected her. Her son, whatever his crimes, was denied his birthright, forced to serve the very institution that had destroyed his parents." Poirot's voice softened. "Whitmore will hang for murder. That cannot be changed, but Eleanor Ashworth's memory can still be honoured." "How?" "A charitable foundation, perhaps, in her name, dedicated to assisting those who have been cast out by society, unwed mothers, illegitimate children, the dispossessed and forgotten." Poirot spread his hands. "A small thing, perhaps, but symbols matter. Acknowledgement matters." Geoffrey considered this. It would be some appropriate. A way of making amends without excusing what Whitmore did. Precisely. Then it will be done. The Eleanor Ashworth Foundation. Geoffrey nodded slowly. "Father would have approved, I think. He was a just man, even if he did not know the full truth." Poirot bowed slightly. Sir Reginald was indeed a just man. It was his tragedy to inherit a legacy of injustice he did not create and could not have suspected. His murder was a crime against an innocent man. Let no one forget that. The formal business concluded, the gathering began to disperse. Hartley and Geoffrey withdrew to discuss the details of their new arrangement. Inspector Jameson departed to attend to the paperwork that would consign James Whitmore to trial, and, inevitably, to the gallows. Miss Crane lingered, approaching Poirot with evident hesitation. "Monsieur Poirot, I wished to thank you." "Thank me, mademoiselle." "For believing in my innocence. When you confronted me about the forgeries, when you suggested I might be responsible, I feared the worst." She managed a small smile. "I thought my career, my reputation, everything I had built would be destroyed by suspicion." "I did not believe in your innocence, mademoiselle. I believed in evidence." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The evidence suggested you had the means and opportunity to commit these crimes, but it did not suggest you had the motive. A loyal servant of 8 years, with no financial difficulties, no grievances, no hidden connections to the Ashworth family history. Why would such a person suddenly turn to embezzlement and murder?" "But you still suspected me." "I suspected everyone. It is my métier." Poirot paused, "But I observed something in you that the others lacked. Genuine grief for Sir Reginald. Not the performative mourning of the guilty, but the quiet sorrow of one who has lost a man she respected." Miss Crane's composure wavered slightly. "He was a good employer, a good man. You wish you could have saved him. As do I." Poirot shook his head sadly. "Sir Reginald came to me for protection, and I failed him. The little grey cells, they worked too slowly. By the time they assembled the truth, it was too late. You cannot blame yourself. Whitmore had been planning this for 30 years. No one could have anticipated, no. But I might have seen the signs earlier. The fresh ink stains upon Whitmore's hands. His nervous reaction when 1909 was mentioned. The way he polished his spectacles. A gesture of anxiety I should have recognized." Poirot sighed. "We learn from our failures, mademoiselle. We remember them, and we strive to do better." Miss Crane nodded, then excused herself. At the door she paused. "The notebook," she said. "The one you found in the reception room. You never asked me why I left it there." "I did not need to ask, I knew." "You knew?" "You suspected something was wrong within the bank. You had observed irregularities, small things perhaps, but troubling. The notebook contained your observations, your suspicions. You left it where it might be found because you hoped someone would investigate." Poirot smiled gently. "You were trying to help, mademoiselle. In your own quiet way, you were trying to expose the truth." Miss Crane's eyes widened. "How did you— The little grey cells! They see what others miss. Go now. The bank will need your steady hand in the days ahead." When she had gone, Poirot and I found ourselves alone in the drawing-room. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the elegant furnishings. "A satisfactory conclusion," I ventured. "Satisfactory." Poirot considered the word. "Justice has been served, yes. Whitmore will answer for his crimes. The Hartleys will receive the recognition denied them for generations. Eleanor Ashworth's memory will be honoured." He shook his head slowly. "But Sir Reginald is still dead. A good man, murdered for sins he did not commit. There is no satisfaction in that, Hastings. Only sorrow. You did everything you could." "Did I?" Poirot's voice was uncharacteristically soft. "I wonder sometimes, mon ami, whether my little grey cells are truly equal to the darkness of the human heart. We speak of justice, of truth, of order, but the heart knows only passion, love, hate, resentment, rage. These are the forces that drive men to terrible acts. And women, yes, the heart does not discriminate." Poirot rose from his chair, moving to the window. Outside, the grey London afternoon was giving way to evening, the lamplighters beginning their rounds. Whitmore loved his mother, loved her memory, loved the idea of justice for her suffering. That love, twisted by decades of resentment, became hatred, and hatred, nurtured in silence, became murder. A tragedy, yes, but also a lesson. Poirot turned to face me, his expression grave. "The sins of the fathers, Hastings, they do not die with the fathers. They live on, passed from generation to generation, poisoning all they touch. Sir Reginald's grandfather committed a fraud in 1909. His son benefited from that fraud without knowing its origin. His grandson inherited a legacy of lies. And now, a century later, blood has been spilled to settle accounts that should have been settled long ago. But you said it yourself. Geoffrey and Hartley have made peace. The Eleanor Ashworth Foundation will help those who have been wronged. Surely some good has come from this. Some good, yes, but at what cost?" Poirot retrieved his hat and coat from the stand by the door. "Come, Hastings, let us return to our rooms. I find I am weary of banks and ledgers and old secrets. A tisane, a warm fire, and the company of a friend. These are the remedies for a troubled spirit. We departed Ashworth and Hartley for the last time, emerging into the cold February evening. The street was quiet, the day's business concluded, and the great stone edifice of the bank loomed behind us, its windows dark. "There is one thing I still do not understand," I said as we walked. "Only one thing. You are improving, Hastings." I ignored the gentle jab. Charles Blackwood. He was the obvious suspect. Gambling debts, nervous behaviour, trembling hands. Yet he turned out to be innocent. Indeed, it was his observation that exposed Whitmore. Ah, yes, the obvious suspect who proved to be nothing of the kind. Poirot smiled. "Blackwood is a cautionary tale, mon ami. He was guilty of gambling, of concealing his debts, of living beyond his means. But he was not guilty of murder. His nervousness, his haggard appearance, these were the signs of a man struggling with his own demons, not the signs of a killer. But you suspected him." "I suspected him because the evidence pointed to him. The little grey cells, they follow the evidence, but they also question it. Why would a man with gambling debts steal £30,000 and leave it in foreign accounts. A gambler needs money now, not later. A gambler would have spent the stolen funds immediately. So his very vices exonerated him. In a sense, yes. His weakness was his alibi. Poirot chuckled softly. There is a lesson there, Hastings. Sometimes the obvious answer is the wrong answer, precisely because it is obvious. The true criminal does not advertise his guilt. He conceals it beneath a mask of respectability. 30 years of loyal service, spectacles and ink-stained fingers, the quiet efficiency of the overlooked. We walked in companionable silence for a time, the sounds of London evening washing over us, the clatter of hansoms, the calls of street vendors, the distant toll of church bells. Poirot, I said at last, do you think Whitmore was right? About the Ashworths, I mean, about justice. Poirot was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. Whitmore was right that an injustice occurred. He was right that the Ashworth fortune was built on lies. He was right that his mother and father were cruelly treated. Poirot paused. But he was wrong to take justice into his own hands, wrong to become judge, jury, and executioner. Wrong to murder an innocent man for the sins of his grandfather. Then what should he have done? Exposed the truth, published Eleanor Ashworth's letter. Let the world judge the Ashworths, not with violence, but with truth. Poirot shook his head. But Whitmore did not want truth. He wanted revenge, and revenge, mon ami, is a poison that destroys the one who drinks it, even as it destroys his enemies. We hailed a cab and climbed inside, the familiar motion of the vehicle carrying us toward home. The heart, Hastings, Poirot murmured, gazing out at the passing streets. It is always the heart that betrays us. The little grey cells, they seek order, logic, reason, but the heart knows only what it feels. And what it feels is not always what is true, or right or just. A grim philosophy. Perhaps, but also a hopeful one. Poirot turned to me, a faint smile touching his lips. For if the heart can be turned toward hatred and vengeance, it can also be turned toward love and forgiveness. Geoffrey Ashworth chose to acknowledge his family's wrongs. Philip Hartley chose to accept reconciliation rather than nurse old grievances. Miss Crane chose loyalty over suspicion. And Whitmore? Whitmore chose differently. And for that choice, he will pay. Poirot settled back in his seat, closing his eyes. But let us not end on such a sombre note. The case is solved. Justice, imperfect as it is, has been served. And tomorrow, Hastings, there will be new mysteries, new puzzles, new challenges for the little grey cells. You are incorrigible. I am Hercule Poirot. His moustache twitched with amusement. It is the same thing. Non? I laughed despite myself, and the cab carried us home through the London night, leaving behind the shadows of Ashworth and Hartley, and the terrible secrets that had finally been brought to light. And so concludes our tale of betrayal, vengeance, and the long shadow of the past. Sir Reginald Ashworth, a good man caught in the web of his grandfather's sins, has been laid to rest. James Whitmore, the patient avenger, awaits the justice he so terribly perverted. And Hercule Poirot, the little Belgian with the magnificent moustache, returns to his rooms in Whitehaven Mansions, ready for whatever mystery next presents itself to his remarkable grey cells. Until next time, dear listeners, remember, the truth is a powerful thing, but only when wielded with wisdom, compassion, and respect for the law. Good night. The end.